Hi, Matt. Today we're having a chat with Matt Gialich, the founder and CEO of AstroForge. Hi, Matt. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. So today we wanted to go a little bit deep into your background, I would say. So what you've been doing after the university, why you choose engineering and why you choose space.
Yeah, I mean, why let's break those down. Why did you choose engineering? We've gotten this weird state in the world where you go to university and you think that is a place where you just get to learn endlessly with no prospect of how you contribute to society after. And I think this is a major problem we have facing society as we go into the future. Things like English majors and history majors, sure, those can be important, and it's great to have people study about what happened in the past and write books. But we got to be really honest here to say there's way too many people in those professions that are never going to be book writers and are never going to go study the ancient pyramids and things like this. And if you look at the stats and breakdown of universities, there's a huge problem with liberal arts and just too many people being in it for what we can maintain as a society. I approach college as a way to learn uh, what is something that could change the future of the human species. And the only way you're going to do that is really three curriculums: engineering, math, or physics. Those are your three choices. And since a little kid, I've always loved computers. I think a lot of us have passions like this. I always liked assembling computers and figuring things out and working with electronics. So I just kind of married my passion with what you could do in the future and said, I want to go study electrical engineering and understand what that is all about. Understand truly how a computer works, how you assemble chips, how you think about structures of data. And that branched out into communications and math and all these other fields that are just extremely interesting when you can go dive into them. But I think to the whole crux of the problem we have in society here is those fields take a lot of studying and a lot of kind of solitary understanding of how to do these things before you can break through in them. And that's so we don't see it a lot. But that's why I went to engineering. It's kind of what I love at the end of the day, and what can also lead to a path forward as you go into society to make a difference.
Got it. How your path was, from engineering to, space, and what was like the trigger moment and when you really started looking at this?
There wasn't no trigger. I mean, there's been no trigger moment. I think I've always loved space. I've always loved computers. I've always loved statistics. There's a whole bunch of things that I'm interested in that I wanted to go down the road and go explore. And I've got to go explore a lot of them. I mean, the first job out of college was not in space, right? It was working on statistics at a little tiny company in Santa Barbara, which was an amazing time. You got to learn a lot about how things are actually applied, how real companies work, all of this. It wasn't until I went to Virgin Galactic that I was directly working on rockets. And I want to be clear here, though, Ivan. Rockets are not necessarily space. They're a transportation mechanism to get you to space. They're not necessarily what happens in space. And so rockets don't have the same passion that I've always had of exploration. I don't think any of us look at space and say like, "Oh, I really care about how you get there." I mean, some people do, don't get me wrong. But for me, it was always, what do you do when you get there? Right? The things that motivate me from day one are missions like Voyager and Cassini and obviously Spirit and Opportunity and all these things we've done on Mars. Like going out and exploring the universe is really the crux of where I think passion comes from for me. And that's what I've always wanted to lean into doing.
Hmm. That's interesting. And you worked at JNC department, like a JNC engineer in Virgin Orbit and Virgin Galactic. So did you get the confidence, to build AstroForge from there, or the idea kind of hit you up later?
There's no such thing as confidence in getting to build an idea. I think when you go take on something like AstroForge and asteroid mining, if you go into it fully confident, that just means you're an idiot and you have blinders on. Like, I'm still not positive this 100% is going to work. Who cares? I think that's the magic in starting companies is you get to go try. I have a thesis that we can mine asteroids and we can do it at a very specific price point, and because of that, we can make a lot of money off it. That is the thesis that I'm operating towards. I also had a thesis a whole bunch of different ways at the company that has been proven wrong. So, like anybody, my goal here is to go test out my thesis as quick and fast as possible to determine if it is correct and then keep iterating on it. And that's exactly what we're doing. So to say I have 100% confidence that this is going to work or it's possible, I can tell you this. I can tell you that the math and physics tells me that it can work.
Hmm.
That's an easy thing to go prove out. I mean, we've mined asteroids before, right? NASA has sent missions to them. We understand trajectories. We understand dynamics. We understand heat flux of re-entering the atmosphere. Like all of these things from a physics standpoint are very, very ingrained and very easy to figure out.
Hmm.
That doesn't mean that you can build them correctly. And that's the real crux of every company is, cool, how do you take that physics that's already crossed the line and go build it correctly? That's a hard thing to go do.
And so what's the hardest thing to do in AstroForge? Is it like landing or mining? What's kind of, makes you?
I mean, the hardest thing for us is, oh, I'll put it to you this way. The biggest challenge we have in front of us is we got to get there. So there's a lot
Hmm.
of hard things that we got to take on. The hardest thing we got to go do is make sure we can get to an asteroid. And that's what the next mission is going to go do, right? We want to make sure that we can show up at the asteroid and determine what it is. That's actually a pretty hard thing to go do. Are there going to be bigger challenges ahead of us after that? Probably, but I don't really spend a lot of time thinking about them right at this moment. The biggest challenge we have is showing up for that price point.
Got it. That's really interesting. But in the 2010s, there were like many companies that were trying to do asteroid mining, like Planetary Resources, Deep Space Industries. They promised massive returns. So why do you think they failed? And what's different today for you in AstroForge?
Yeah, look, every idea I didn't come up with this idea on my own. I mean, obviously those are the people ahead of us that really gave us a whole bunch of information and theses on how to go do that. And Rick Tomlinson, one of the founders at at Deep Space Industries, and Chris Lewicki at Planetary Resources have been kind of huge inputs to how we think about this, right? They're not people that stay silent in the backgrounds. They've been really helpful as you think about the future of what we want to go do. There's one big difference. And the big difference is for the first time in human history, I have access to lower cost launches to deep space.
Hmm.
That's the big difference. I mean, if you look at 2010 and you wanted to go on a launch vehicle that could get you to the moon or beyond, you were really looking at two options in America, the Atlas V or the Delta IV. And both of those are going to be $400 to $500 million a launch. That's really expensive. That is not the prices we are paying to be rideshare on these NASA Eclipse missions going out to the moon. So the price per launch is just lowered so dramatically that we can actually go try. It does not mean, again, we'll be successful, but it means I get a shot on goal. We've already taken one and we're going to take another.
Yeah, that makes sense, I would say. And stepping a bit back to your experience, so why you stopped working for, other companies and decided to found AstroForge? I'm trying to repeat myself, but I hope it doesn't look this way. I just want to really understand why and when you've decided to do it.
There is a very long and complicated story, and I don't want to ever give the impression that I woke up one morning and I was like, my life's work is to go mine asteroids. I don't think that's ever how this works. I think the saying that ideas are cheap is very true. And a lot of people have a lot of ideas to do something. It's kind of a slower process to have the balls to go do it, right? Like having the guts to go start a company is not something small. And I think this is why you see deep respect between founders that go tackle these things. It's really hard to start companies. It's really hard to make these things work. So, how do you get to that point where you're going to go start an asteroid mining company? Well, it comes in a myriad of things. First off, it wasn't just I was at Virgin and then I said, oh, you know what? I'm going to go start an asteroid mining company. I actually noticed Eclipse missions when I was at Virgin, but after that, I went to a company called Bird Rides, the scooter company. The whole reason I went there is because I wanted to learn how to build something different. In the rocket industry, we are told over and over again, and I think all defense, we've had this thing for a long time in America that China makes cheap products. You don't want to work with China, they suck. They're communist, they think different than us, blah, 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 blah. But then I hold this thing in my hand called the iPhone, and it's probably one of the marvels of engineering of the 20th century, 21st century, I should say. And so you realize that what you're being told through the media is maybe different than what is the reality on the ground. So I actually wanted to go work with it and understand what was true and what wasn't. And that's why I went to Bird, right? Bird gave me the opportunity to work with companies in China and understand how they operated. And when you do that, you kind of make a couple key understandings right away. Number one, you see this understanding of the factory setting and how they think about production and how they think about building. They never think small scale. They never think onesie twosies. They always think high rate production. There's multiple people that are in the same area doing high rate production with them, usually that are some way connected to each other. So while you may have final assembly being done by one company, the parts are manufactured right down the street, and the brake handle was manufactured 2 blocks away. And in these special manufacturing zones, you realize like, oh, there's a network effect that happens in China that we just don't get in America. When I buy parts for my boards, like they come from some place in, Indiana, and it's not a 5 mile square area where all these manufacturing exists. It's what it is in China. And then you really notice that there is just no America, we love to build up perceptions. We love to build up ego. We can call it being a grifter to some extent, right? There's a lot of this that happens in the startup industry. You get none of that in China. None of it. It's
Mm,
very different and it underwrites value very differently because of that. Now, I'm not saying that's actually a good thing. I'm just a noticeable observation you have is that the ego level there is extremely small. There isn't necessarily like a factory overlord that runs a factory, right? It's run by a whole bunch of people that think their job is to produce the best resource. It's just a very different methodology for how they go produce. And that allows them to produce very quickly and cheaply. And so after that, you realize this and you say, hold on, what if I applied in America some of the techniques I see out of China to an aerospace company? What could you come up with, right? And how do you think about this? And then you realize there's an opportunity here to get lower cost launch into deep space. You can kind of quickly start putting the pieces of the puzzle together that if you think you can now produce or get cheap missions into space, right? Cheap launches into space, and you think you can use some of these techniques to now produce a lower cost spacecraft, what can you go do?
hmm
That was really where the company comes from is just, okay, we can now travel into the universe very cheaply. What do we go do? And we wrote a list down of things we thought we could go do. One of them was asteroid mining. There's quite a few other things on that list, all pretty dumb ideas. Asteroid mining is the one we landed with.
Got it. But how do you apply this, to America? You said there's still a lot of ego from the founders. How do you find partners and people you work with? Is it still a hard thing to do,
I
for
actually don't
for the
think there's a
founders?
lot of ego from founders. I think there's a lot of ego from other people at companies in a lot of cases that are not the founders.
Mm,
That's more what I'm referring to. It's like you get these big egos that build up right underneath the founders. And you kind of see this all the time. You see everybody with a VP title have a giant ego at some of these companies, and then they go out and try to start a company and fall flat on their face. It's like a story as old as time because being a founder and being a C-level executive at a company are still two very different things. And even though you can see it and observe it right away, like if you work with Elon Musk every day, it doesn't mean you're going to be Elon Musk, right?
yeah.
It doesn't mean that you're going to be Steve Jobs. And I think a lot of people think that is the case and they get this wrong. What I'm saying is in China, you don't see any of that. I think the main reason is there really isn't Elon Musk or Steve Jobs in China in these manufacturing companies.
hmm
They're not really built up with that big of a delineation between who is running the company and who's doing the individual line work. And that in some ways can be really helpful to how you think about manufacturing. Another way to say this is flat organizations matter. As soon as you start to relinquish control of your company to everybody below you and delegate it down into a myriad of VPs and managers, you actually just lose the soul of a company. And that is what that has been obviously something we try to avoid at a very high level here, right? We want to be as flat as possible. But I think that's the real kicker for China is that doesn't exist.
hmm That's interesting. Okay, moving on to, I think this is a great answer to all of my questions. And moving on to the next topic, which is how do you look at, space industry overall? What do you think is going to happen with us as a humanity in 10 years? Are we going to be on Mars or are we going to be on the moon? What are we going to do there? And any applications to the existing technology which we already have?
It's pretty clear we're going back to the moon. I think there's a ton of capital allocation that has been made to go back into the moon, to go redo what we did with Apollo, but hopefully get a permanent base there. And you see things like Lunar Gateway and all of this. But you asked the question, what happens in 10 years? I think in 10 years, we are going to the moon. I think there is a human presence on the moon. I think it is another Cold War between China and America on who could have the most technology advancement on the moon and how we can build that up. Um, we're seeing a lot of graphs that we're extrapolating up and to the right on space, and I'm not sure which one of those are going to hit. Are we going to see AI space data centers? Maybe that's a realistic thing we'll see or not. I don't know how much of compute that's going to account for. I personally think that that's a really, really difficult thing to get right, and there's a lot of challenge there as we get going. What I think is going to happen, though, for sure, is we're going to see a lot more rocket launches happen. And because of that, we're going to have a lot more mass that goes to the moon and beyond. But that mass is going to be paid for. And if the US government continues funding this at a high level, we'll see lunar exploration. If they don't, what we'll actually see is a dramatic reduction in the price of launch even more, and more commercial applications start to come to fruition. AstroForge is a commercial focused company. It doesn't mean we want to work with the government. We love our country. I want to be very clear about that. But I want to make sure that as a company, what we are actually going after is commodity resources to be sold on the planet. That is our business model. We are a mining company Best way to think about it. Mining company that thinks the best ore is just in space. And that's how we want to go operate into the future. I do think in 10 years we will be absolutely mining materials and bringing them back to Earth. I think we'll have a presence on the moon. And I think we'll always have our eye to the stars and what else we can do. Will we have humans on Mars in 10 years? I think that's going to be really hard. Not impossible, but I think really hard. And it's going to require a political and governmental effort to make that happen. I don't think individual companies are going to do that from their own will. I do think you are going to start to see individual companies of their own will, specifically Blue Origin, start to go explore the universe on a commercial instead of a governmental focus and see what they can find.
Hmm. And do you think the exploration should be, paid by government, or you think it should be like commercial applications first? What's your perspective on this?
Exploration classically has always been funded by governments with an eye on how you increase economic viability of a country. When we look at it, whether it is North Pole expeditions or coming to America, right? Christopher Columbus or whoever you want to say did it. The whole reason there was an economically driven way to go do it, right? How they thought about different trade routes, how they thought about different ways to get to different places. That's always why we've done it. And I think the problem we have with space is there isn't a clear economic rationale always to go explore the universe. And so this has always resided in the lines of government. But let's look at this differently. I'm a believer that we're kind of running out of scientific breakthroughs we can do on the Earth. And you'll notice this by everything becoming more and more expensive. The Large Hadron Collider has given us a huge understanding. Things like the Higgs boson have been confirmed, a whole bunch of other research in particle physics. I mean, I don't know how many papers have been published out of it. That's amazing. Well, what's next? Do you build an LHC that's 10 times bigger to get more data? Real answer is you go build it in space. Real answer is all the science discovery that we have out there is going to come from space. We need to go explore the universe more, and I think that's going to lead to some huge advancement on the planet as we go into the future. That is where I think the real physics breakthroughs are going to go come through. But how do you monetize that? That's always going to be the challenge as we go into the future.
Yeah. We live in the capitalism, era, and previously we've been, traveling to like opening in America or going to India just to make money, right? And mining was essentially the first thing that comes to my mind of silver and then gold. And do you think this is like the same thing with AstroForge? And why do you think there is not enough of understanding from funds or even government that we should do it because economically makes sense?
I mean, I think there is a lot of understanding from funds. We've raised quite a bit of money, right? So it's not like nobody understands that this is a possible outcome of what you can do into the future. But I'm not going to sugarcoat it and say this isn't high risk. What I'll say is the risk tolerance here has to be very high to invest in a company like AstroForge. We are going after a revolutionary in how we think about mining the planet. More specifically, how we give America sovereignty when it comes to some of these critical minerals that we just don't have within the continental US. How do we go do this? How do we solve the platinum problem? Well, I'll give you two options to go solve the platinum problem, maybe three. Option number one, we stop using the platinum group metals. So every piece of technology you talk to, you look at your iPhone, this LCD screen I'm looking at you on, all of this disappears. Is that a future we want?
Not
Probably
really.
not. Option number two, we go invade South Africa because that's where all the platinum is. And so that's option number two. Option number three is you go to the only place that we know we have confirmed ore that you can go mine and get access to from the United States. And that is the proposed 10 million near Earth asteroids that fly around us every day in space. That is what we want to go do. We are going into a future of resource contention. You're seeing this kind of bubble to the surface in a whole bunch of different ways. The resource war is real. I want to go solve it with a big swing. I'm not interested in increasing our supply 1% or 2% or doing this or that. We want to go solve it holistically for America. And that's pretty much capitalism in a nutshell.
Yeah. I don't have any questions regarding the space economy. I feel like AstroForge will be, big part of what's going to happen in space. But finishing up and looking back at when you started working in 2008, knowing everything you know about the rockets, startups, space, what would you say to yourself?
Don't be a bitch. That's it. Right, Ivan? Like, Like, go for it. I mean, I think that's what everybody needs to tell themselves as we get in this mode. Here's the reality. I play Monopoly with my children. And when I play Monopoly, it's like leverage to the hilt, buy every piece of property you can and go big or go home. When we go play the game of life, we actually sit there and we're like, well, how do I do a risk-adjusted return on this and that? And you know what you never heard anybody say that's ever done anything special on this planet is go back and say, I'm really glad I saved 10% on that car. Or I got my house at a 5% interest rate instead of 6. Because in the grand scheme of things, when you're really trying to do something that's outsized to everybody else, they don't fucking matter. But we like to say, I'm going to work at this job one more year so I can save enough money to have security. I want security. We as humans love security. It's one of the biggest fallacies we have as humans. Security is always kind of a self-created prophecy that happens in society and very easy. I mean, look at what just happened in Mexico yesterday, right? The sense of security just disappeared in a heartbeat. So why do
Yeah.
we keep putting so much effort into security? Don't. Go for it. I think everybody needs to hear that we don't need to sit there and just wait 4 more years until we have enough money that we can't fail. Who cares? Just go for it now and see what'll happen.
Yeah, I think that's a great ending for our podcast, and thanks for joining me today. Happy to talk with AstroForge. AstroForge probably will be one of the biggest companies. I hope so. So yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ivan.